Good morning. Welcome to the Auckland Festival of Photography panel on the Believe theme. My name is Julia. I think many of you already know me, and some of you have worked with me quite well for some years. The Auckland Festival of Photography is in its 21st year, and for the last 11 years we've been running a theme annually. And I just wanted to start by talking through some of the previous themes which lead into this year's theme of Believe. In 2014, we had our first theme of memory. 2015, we went on to truth and fiction, which in many ways actually is the precursor to the Believe theme that we're doing today, which looked at the truth of photography versus staged photography and fine arts. We had home in 2016, 2017 identity, 2018 control, 2019 fissure, and that one was sort of a difficult one to sort of wrangle, but we got there with the help of Cambodian-based Jessica Lim, who was our curator that year. 2020 we had Unseen, which was perfect because obviously it was the start of the COVID pandemic, and Unseen was what was happening. We couldn't see what our enemy was or the fear that we were all experiencing about this new virus. 2021 we had isolation because when the world went into lockdown, artists got really busy. You know, the amount of creative projects that were created and delivered around the world from, you know, every country, huge. So when some art historian in 100 years' time looks at 2020, they're going to find a lot of really good work was made. And so in 2021, we showed quite a fair bit of it, including Julia Fullerton-Batten's work, where she invited members of the community in London to dress up in their windows with some lights that were dropped at the door by her son, and then she photographed them. It's a beautiful series. 2022, we had disruption, and 2023, we had resistance. Again, disruption was a little bit looking at climate. We had the work of Gideon Mendel, who's chased storms and flooding around the world. I think he's been to over 15 countries. And the work was called Drowning World. And in fact, it was still on the wharf in January last year when we had the unprecedented January Auckland floods, which saw Elton John's concert cancelled, as well as, unfortunately, lots of damage and some poor fatalities. So, today, we're here to talk about Believe. Our themes generally are decided sometime around October, November each year, and then we go through the process of inviting and curating the work for the festival. So, we've got together today a group of lens-based artists, photojournalists, photography manipulators, and filmmakers who are going to speak to the theme and their interpretation of how we see what is an increasing question in the creative world. Thank you, Sharon. So just quickly from the press release that we put out for the start of the festival, we've all seen photographs that have made us ask, is that real? Over time, we've developed greater skepticism of the medium as a window to the truth. We only need to review the global interest in the British royal family's edited family portrait, or closer to home, Brian Brake's famous constructed documentary image of the Monsoon Girl, which was on the front cover of the Life magazine in the 50s. And Life would have been a little bit like the BBC was in the 60s and 70s, one of the most highly respected documentary news magazines in the world. But this image was actually him with a watering can, or his assistant with a watering can, pouring the water onto this young girl in Asia to make it look like she was in reverential heaven being rained on. So to know that photography has never been an objective purveyor of reality. So with the growth of AI as a tool in the artist's toolkit, the question has become, how does photography maintain its role and credibility in reflecting society's philosophical, ideological, religious and political beliefs? And again, you know, the old adage is seeing is believing. But I think one that we didn't mention in our e-news or on the promotion is a photograph tells 1,000 words, and what we're here today to discuss is whose words are they. So with that, with that, I'd like to introduce our highly experienced and esteemed panel. Jeanette Daly is the head of news visuals here at NZME. Daly? One of them. We've partnered with the NZME for the last few years for a show down at the Silo, and Jeanette's been the kind of curator, selection, co-ord on that, and we're delighted she can join us briefly while she's also supposed to be covering the news desk today. John Karapiat is a New Zealand artist and photographer. He's been working in photography for several decades, and last year he's created a series purely in AI, which is on show down at the Silo 7, and in particular pertinent to the current news of yesterday and today. His image of Donald Trump, I think, is one that he might speak to during this conversation. Sharon Ward is a Emmy Royal Television Society and BAFTA award-winning documentary filmmaker from New Zealand, who's made observational documentaries and is an investigative journalist. And she's made and produced work for the BBC, Channel 4, ITV, Al Jazeera and The Guardian, amongst others. And so we're delighted to welcome Sharon today to this discussion. And finally, but not in any less important role here, is Sarah Palmer. Sarah's also presenting in the festival her work, Wish You Were Here, which looks at the cruise ship industry and its impacts on the environment and the unsustainable business model that is. Sarah's based in Toronto, Canada. Her work straddles the realm of journalism and fine art. Thank you very much. So let me start off with Jeanette, because I think that the belief theme and the issue of AI is crucial to the outputs of news media in photography, because obviously it's about trust. Cool. So could you talk a little bit about that? Thank you. Oh.
Thanks, Julia. I think in terms of believe and AI, I think that the biggest thing that the NZ Herald or NZME photographers and videographers have is we're almost like holding the floodgate back and making sure that people know that we're still shooting in camera and we're not, we've had a big discussion about the use of AI, and we're wholly pretty much rejecting it at the moment because it goes against everything that we're doing, and which is trying to make real images on a daily basis to go in the paper and online. I think increasingly that gets a little bit blurred, and I think just a small story about that. In the warehouse last week, I came in, overheard 3 people, and one person said, oh, well, they can do anything in Photoshop these days, and on video as well, of course. And I thought, I'm really going to have to bite my tongue and not get into that conversation. So, of course, the other 2 were agreeing, and I thought, let's not go down that rabbit hole by me saying, actually, could I just put my hand up and say that it's very difficult to manipulate a lot of stuff in Photoshop unless you've got a whole day. And also, just because you can do it doesn't mean to say you are. And who is they that they're talking about, which I thought was very interesting. So in terms of that, I thought that was, the, in quotes, they are doing it. Because obviously the Herald, we have had a talk about AI, and if we have manipulated any image, we always say we have, and we put it in the caption, and it's very clear. And when we say manipulation, we might have enhanced a background to make a resolution better. Or we have a cropped image so the elbows are cut off, and that would take you quite a long time in Photoshop to get that, or we'd have to crop it a little bit. It's just about getting the resolution for us. So we may extend slightly on each side, which literally puts the elbow back in, and that is about the extent of what we do. And also we see ourselves as the gatekeepers, the picture editors or the the old picture editor, which is now a visual director. So we see ourselves doing that. We were going to have Michael Craig here today, who's actually just become the Voyager Photographer of the Year, but he's been moved out to cover the fire. That's just a large fire in Otahuhu. So we might get him to chat after he's listened to this. But on a daily basis, the Herald photographers are getting live pictures and still getting things in camera. So, you know, when you look at it, people would maybe automatically assume that was done in post. Well, no, our photographers do everything real in camera as they're working daily. So I think that's for me.
Can I just ask you, from the perspective of supplied images, as far as the Herald is concerned, because obviously with that example that I gave of the British Royal Family photograph that was published widely internationally and then retrieved.
Yeah, Julie's just asking about supplied images, which we get supplied a lot more than we used to. So we've already had loads of pictures from the Otahuhu fire from people sending them into the news desk and on Facebook before our photographers even got there. So we are very careful with supplied images. We always ask permission. So we never take things. I know people assume that we do. Unless we know where it's come from, we're always checking the provenance and the permissions. So it doesn't 100% work, but 99.5% it does. And most people will allow the Herald to use their image. And with supplied images and with AI, I certainly, and I would think the other visual directors as well, would always make sure that was an actual image, and it's fairly easy to spot. I think that every picture editor in the world looked at the Kate image and said, something wrong with that. I was a little bit bothered by the hand, or just, it was actually the lighting for me. I thought the lighting was different. So the back picture was kind of okay. She'd been put in the front. That was my interpretation of it. And then AP decided that they couldn't at all
confidence.
They could not put that image out, or they had to recall it and say that they thought that particular image was manipulated and they couldn't put it out because it would go against their gatekeeping of their own imagery. So, which of course, the minute they did that, then that opens it up to how that was done. A very bad Photoshop job. And yeah.
You said that the AI was easier to spot.
I think so still.
About 4
I think it'll be harder going forward, but I think that yes, there are certain, call it it's almost a premonition for a picture editor. I think you can just look at it and you start twitching. You think there's something not right about that.
Usually,
so
if
you
it's
would
really
have
good, if it's a really good image.
Sorry, if it's a really, I actually read an article and it was only written about a month ago, and it said this will be valid for about 3 or 4 months, maybe not longer than that, because it's advancing so fast. But even now, hands are not done well. You look at the background of the image, and it might be a little bit, it won't be complete. Like an array of watches in a background to a scene weren't full watches. Typeface on a billboard in a shop. If you ask the AI to generate an image and it had a billboard of a shop in the background, that typing might be nonsense. It wouldn't actually be a real name of a shop. And my one is, if it's a really good picture of a portrait, I go, hang on, is that a real portrait or is it a fake portrait? Because now that's the signal. But I just want to say I'm very excited to hear what you're saying about the policy not to use AI, or to at least reveal if there's any adjustment. I think that AI is a disaster for trust in human communication of all levels, because of the video and the film and the sound and everything. So I think trust and having somewhere to know the provenance of the image, traceability of an image, authenticity, all of those things will become incredibly important, because, as I say, I think it's a disaster for trust in human communication.
Yep.
Won't the intuition almost that you're talking about,
as AI becomes more and more accomplished,
Yeah.
then it's going to become much harder to spot those glaring errors that you're talking about.
Well, that's why we need the media or the generator or the presenter of that image to say what it is. I mean, in fact, I'm happy to say these are AI images that I put into the show, but
that's the
there's
problem,
also they're transparently fake. I think. I mean, maybe someone would believe I was really there and photographed these people and made their eyes close and said thanks very much. But there's a transparency of the artifice in them. I think the problem is when you don't know there's an artifice in it, which is what Boris's picture that won the Sony Award is all about. Because, I mean, it's almost the opposite of what I believe in. I'm an old-fashioned photographer. I mean, I literally photograph the media, so I photograph the TV screen, but in real time, using old-fashioned film or digital. His work is very AI-based and has been for years, and so and he wouldn't say it's a photograph. He would say that is an AI image.
generated image.
I'm arguing that the images that I'm playing with, and it's almost like it's a bit like you holding the line. This is the last line of an old-fashioned photographer, this work. I won't be able to do it again, it's a one-off, it is an idea, but it's the last real photograph. That's what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that AI is such a challenge to what a photograph is. We need to define it through that provenance and traceability. But my little theory at the moment is a photograph is an event witnessed, captured in a moment in time, and I've got a little bit of a codicil printed out into the real world, because while it's on the internet, it's just another image.
Sorry.
I'm
but
sorry,
also-
which way go?
Sorry, but John, also when Boris was chatting with Radio New Zealand, he was actually really clear that photography is about capturing light. So that is
Well,
also something that
yeah.
you
It's
need
light,
to have in that.
Yeah, I'm not sure it matters if it's on, like if it's, I don't think it's a photograph if it's just printed versus on screen. I think it can be a photograph either way.
It's how it's made.
Yeah, I think
I
it
added
is.
I added the printed bit because of this work, actually, because while it was on the screen, I didn't feel it existed. But once it was printed out as a postcard or as a print or as a little memento mori, it took on the aura of that physicality. And I guess that's it. And I'm not disagreeing that it's still a photograph if you're looking at it online. But I'm thinking about the credibility of the image. It becomes a little bit more credible when you've got it in your hand. I know it can be fake, I know that. It's just, as I say, it's a codicil to the three principles. And I would have put light in, except for this change in technology that digital did to old-fashioned photography, to say, oh, hang on, the light's now digital numbers, etc. So I completely believe in the magic of light in the real world, and that's what the spiritual aspect of the work's about. But manifesting it, for me, just breaks it away from the purely digital, virtual world that you don't know what it is.
Well, I mean, I started out actually, funnily enough, in photojournalism because I did a course in photojournalism at AUT, which, of course, I come from documentary filmmaking. So particularly in the Middle East, where you have got authoritarian regimes and police states who are obviously trying to push a certain narrative and are pushing out their propaganda machine, and they're trying to basically lie and give their version of events. And say, for example, in Libya, where we had Gaddafi saying, oh, no, my people aren't against me, they all love me, my people love me, which is famous. Look at them all smiling. Of course, they're all paid to be there, and there's thugs pushing people in to the square. So obviously our role as photojournalists and as documentary filmmakers is to capture the truth of the situation as much as you can. And, there's this old adage in photojournalism, Pics or it didn't happen. So if someone's claiming there's been a bomb blast in Syria or Iraq or, in Gaza, unless you can prove it, you've got the pictures, you've got the evidence that it's real, that it happened. And then, of course, you've got the whole issue with provenance. You have got the issue now, of course, with a lot of stuff going on in Syria and Gaza is the provenance of those images and user-generated images, which, of course, is people on social media, especially in regimes and countries where you can't get in. And so there's always been this thing for our discipline in terms of documentary filmmaking and investigative journalism and photojournalism this is 100% the truth.
Just to speak to that, Alison Jackson's work, the British photographer, who makes those whole scenarios. And she had Trump walking around, and it's clearly a model, but then she'll take a picture of it, and I mean, she's been doing that for a long time, and at first they were quite controversial because they look so real, and they were literally a model of the Queen sitting on the bathroom throne reading the paper. But of course there was a fake. So that's Alison Jackson's work is still doing that. Sharon needs to speak now, I think.
I'm going to lead into Sarah, but I just wanted to really kind of take up what Sharon was talking about, which is actually professional standards. Now, I understand what Sharon's talking about. I was actually BBC management trained way back in my 20s. It's also been reinforced by my work in Television New Zealand in the newsroom, and throughout my entire visual career, which has been over 3 decades. So it is super important, and I think we are in a period of disinformation where everybody's opinion matters clearly, because we live in a democracy. We support freedom of expression. We have a Bill of Rights. We have all of these rights, but with all rights come responsibilities. And who is managing those responsibilities? Well, clearly our panel are at the forefront of trying to keep those rights and responsibilities in balance. So on that note, I want to just pass back to Sarah, because obviously your work is constructed in camera with multiple exposures. Can you talk about why you think that is the best treatment for that work as a photojournalist?
Sure. So this is primarily how I shoot, is on film, making multiple exposures. So I focus on like subcultures and pop cultures, and recently how subcultures are affected by the climate crisis. So for me, I come from a photojournalism background, and I don't manipulate anything in post-production. It's very important for me that I don't do that. So by creating it in camera, I think it still is photojournalism, and I can still be published by like accredited newspapers like the Washington Post and the Globe and Mail in Canada and other places. And I just find, I think if you stay true to photojournalism's like ethics and standards, then you can tell stories in a different way and still keep the, I guess, trust with the public, if that makes sense. And then just other points I wanted to add. So with the World Press Photo this year, they actually added an AI category. And there was a huge uproar, and it was basically freelance photographers and photojournalists that were like, whoa, no, this is not okay.
They're not photographers.
So you have to, we as freelancers don't have many rights, and we don't have pensions, we don't have any of that, but we have to hold these huge organizations accountable, or else it will slide very quickly into allowing AI into your everyday life and into, trusted news organizations sometimes. And then also, I think, with crediting photographs or photo illustrations or promptography, as you called it, which I like, in newspapers, I think it's great, but the average person doesn't know how to look for a credit that says that. Like my parents don't even know what a photo credit is. And especially if you're opening a magazine, the photo credit can be in the spine hidden. So it has to be, I think it should be very clearly stated somewhere right below the photograph, or there should be something in an editorial letter clearly stated on a website or in the paper saying, look, we're starting to introduce AI with certain images. This is what to look for if they're going to do it. Otherwise, it should just not be in newspapers or magazines at all, because like I said, it's only really photographers that can tell the difference at this point, because it is getting so good. But yeah.
I mean, I'm really glad that you're holding the line and keeping those standards, but I think the horse has bolted, not just because of social media really, and the fact that user-generated images that were always very, expanding over recent years. Now, any user can go and use an AI-generated, create an incredible image, and I guess one of the big problems about the AI images that you can generate by promptography is that every image has been stolen. Every image that's ever existed has been stolen into the system, and you can create images in the style of that is basically copyright theft. So it's the end of copyright. It's the end of trust in in human communications, because unless there's either a reliable provider like a media outlet or provenance in some way can be trusted. But even that's very hard to imagine. So Yeah, I think the horses bolted them in a very, very, very problematic time in history.
Yeah, 100%.
Stock images, like, not, that you might use in canvas or something to accompany a survival story.
Mm.
I know those are photographs, but they're so often so generic that they've got a manufactured feel.
I think that'll be the first one to go, is the stock images,
Yeah.
because obviously they're paying a photographer to go out and
Yeah.
get all those pictures of people at beaches and, you know.
And commercial photography and
Yeah,
advertising.
and I search through those sites daily to look for a generic image of a teenager, you know, with a smartphone. And yes, now I can say that those are images that have been taken by one of their photographers and put in as stock, or given to the agency. But yeah, those will be the first ones that starts creeping in. So I guess we're going to have to be a little bit more vigilant on that, or we're going to have to get our photographers to go out and do a set of pictures of that, and then have them in our own stock library. So I think that's a gatekeeper issue
Yeah,
again.
but the financial implications of that,
That's,
you know, I mean, that is also, sorry. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, obviously running a festival on the smelly, oily rag, as they say, you know, to be able to hire photographers to go out and do that, you've obviously got a team on hand, but that's still allocating resources, budget and time to do that. And the truth of the matter is it probably wouldn't happen, to be fair. So I just wanted to kind of just bring the conversation back to some other work that's in the festival, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the key shows we also decided to promote and program this year was from NASA. NASA is a huge space agency paid for by the US taxpayer. But, you know, the fact that somebody 15 years ago in a science team decided that sending a telescope out into the universe, to the furthest reaches of this world universe that we're all in, and had photography at the heart of that project, and was able to not only build the telescope, launch it, deliver it, and then beam these images back to Earth without the decisive moment of photography, is a key part of why we program this work, because this is there's no photographer involved.
right.
However, it is
It sure
photography.
is.
So I wondered if you'd like to kind of consider that in relation to the overall conversation, John.
Just very quickly, so I had this conversation about my attempt to define what a photograph is, and to witness an event, ideally it's a human witnessing it, but in a way they are photographs because the machine was recording an event in time, maybe composited, etc., etc. So all of those kind of caveats come into play, but it didn't have to be an event that was witnessed by a human. So I'm adding that one. Would it be nice if it was? That's a classic photograph, but these are still photographs in my kind of feeling about it. The difference between this and an AI generated image is, and you can argue that there was a moment when the pixels came together in the AI's mind, or machinery, so that was a moment, but I don't think there was. When Boris creates those images, there's no one moment except when it pops up on his screen that it came into existence to be witnessed. So he witnessed it
It's
popping
the
up.
click, isn't it?
Yes, and so that's what these are. The images that I put into the festival, there was a click. It was a moment captured in time, witnessed by me. Well, I don't think it needed to be witnessed by a human. I think these are still photographs.
This is also about Steve. It's a drone. It's
Funny, I was just looking at that picture, and a lot of people would think this is the picture of Mike Scott's picture taken on the grass, and a lot of people. Well, I mean, if you tried to set that up when I was at the BBC, I probably would have had the guy standing up, and then we would have dropped them in on the grass. That was BBC Times, but Mike Scott's actually put a drone up to take that picture. And the set of pictures. So again, it's all in camera, and he's controlling it. It's a real event.
It's a real event, captured maybe a couple of times, but it's witnessed by someone or something. But it's a moment in time. And I still think printing it out, and I think that's partly, I think it's partly because I'm holding on to both kind of the art, you know, an exhibition of photography in an exhibition space, printed out in nice frames, which I've kind of let go a little bit of, but also, you know, as I say, look at this. I mean, this is a unique piece because in 3 or 4 years' time, there ain't going to be a little bit of material to look at and hold up. It's going to be on our phones, you know, it really is. I mean, unless we really fight for it. But so the printing out, I mean, your pictures, until they come out into a show or book, I'm not saying they don't exist, but they're manifested into the real world is something that I think is part of it. And yes, it could be one of Boris's images manifest in the world, but that's not a photograph, that's a print of a AI image. What I'm arguing is that it's something, and it used to be to do with light, it really did, and the whole, as I said, that spiritual magic of old-fashioned photography, which has kind of ebbed away. And I mean, in a way, the style, one of the most interesting things to observe is that when you Google AI photographs, Boris's work comes up, and the first row of work, including now, I'm very proud to say, oh, there's my work, it's all new photographs pretending to be old. Sepia, old-fashioned black and white.
Yes.
Cameron.
Archival. I think the other thing, of course, that we've all talked about is that AI generated images. Yeah, royalties. A freelance photographer's income, we are going to be cut out of the picture because we are going to lose work and jobs and money because, like you say, every AI generated image is copyright theft. It's stealing other people's work.
The good thing is the Americans won't copyright it. I mean, I'm not sure about this, but the good thing is that under the American law, an AI image can't be copyrighted because it's not been invented by a human.
It's not no original author.
Right.
Yes.
So then the object becomes important because you can't copyright the image, but like I think Boris's work is now sold for large amounts of money as a print. Even though it's the most famous picture online, it's the print of the object that now becomes a bit of a fetishistic item.
I mean, I think the biggest issue now that we're going to have coming forward as AI is going to get better and better and better, and we're going to have these deep fakes where video is going to be more and more manipulated, and I know there are some very nefarious groups and countries doing that, looking at that right now. And there was that BBC drama called The Capture, which I don't know if many people have seen, which is utterly scary, where they've actually managed to completely, I mean, this is at the moment fiction, but it's based on where we're going, and what is going to happen is we're going to have fake footage of politicians saying the most outrageous, things. This one was in a Newsnight, BBC Newsnight live interview, and I think, let's not be naive here. This is where it's going. We are going to be in that situation, and unless we fight for it or push back, I don't know how we're going to do that. Right? I don't know how we're going to fight back, because we can keep questioning it. Maybe it's educating the audience.
Yeah, I think again it comes back to who is they, and we are they. That great saying by Jacinda Ardern after the mosque attack, they are us. So what we're talking about is this AI thing, but actually without us pushing the buttons and John sitting at his computer and creating work and Boris creating work, AI is nothing. So we hold the power at the end of the day. And I mean, festivals obviously are great vehicles for distribution of artists' work and photojournalism, because the traditional distribution models are and have been in disintegration for the last 12 years, 15 years. The festival started in 2004. Everybody was shooting on film. By 2008, film was dead. Or we thought it was dead. We went from film to digital cameras, but they were still cameras like Carson is holding over there. But now we have phones, and we walk around with a picture library of thousands of images. We have our own stock libraries in our pockets. So it's everything really, isn't it? And I think what you mentioned about sort of not having, that long-term financial security is really important, because if you look at AI in respect to copyright of music, all the big music companies now are striking up kind of legislative changes in order to protect those royalties for musicians. Visual artists don't have that global heft, and we don't, there is no single organisation, maybe World Press Photo, but World Press Photo is and of itself a commercial vehicle which charges large amounts of money to show the photographs around the world. And in many ways, after the 2012 image that was brought into question, it then for several years became almost like their go-to PR controversy to create doubt in the minds of the viewer about the images or about the submissions that they were being sent, because it got them great exposure. So there was a little bit of, smoke and mirrors going on there, I think, with World Press Photo. Because obviously the veracity of photography and photojournalism was dissolving in actual fact.
I just want to speak a little bit about Sarah's work, because Sarah's work is called Last Chance, well, wish you were here, right?
Yeah.
About last chance tourism, which is really interesting because it's about the climate crisis and going to places, tourists. It's almost like disaster, isn't it? Disaster tourism, like going to places that we are not disappearing, like glaciers, for example, that are disappearing. We're never going to see again. So in a way, for me, that's bringing it back to the veracity and the meaning of why we do what we do, is because we're capturing, seeing is believing. So there are some people out there who are climate denialists and are trying to deny that the climate crisis is real and that we are heading towards, the sixth mass extinction. We are on the precipice of a massive tipping point where things are, the Gaia, the gyrospheres, everything's going to spin out of control. And we're already seeing that now. We're seeing the fires, the wildfires. We're seeing massive floods. We're seeing a day's rain, a month's rain in a day. We're seeing the cyclone Gabrielle. We're seeing the Auckland floods. It's going on around the world. But, so Sarah's work is showing that actually there is a scene, even if some of the images are manipulated or they're double exposures, right, in camera.
Yeah.
It's showing that seeing is believing. That the irony, of course, though, of people going to see is a tourist experience, to go and see, oh, look, the glaciers are disappearing, let's go and see them before they're gone.
I'll give you a quote on that in a minute.
Yeah. And so the little short film that I've quickly made for the festival, Believe in Te Kapa Moana, is just a little film that shows that, everyone thinks that the Hauraki Gulf is this glistening jewel, and when you look at it on the top, it looks beautiful. But underneath, it's a desolate wasteland. Most of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is. It's the kilometres, because we've overfished, whether it's commercial or recreational fishers. It's degraded. The scallop beds have collapsed. The snappers, there's not enough. There's quota that are functionally extinct in the Gulf. You could go on and on, the sedimentation that's going into the Gulf. There's a number of factors that are completely lending itself to its degradation. But if you see that seeing is believing, if you see the difference between the stark kinnibarrens and what you can see in a marine reserve, for example, when there is a no-take zone and when that area is protected, like Goat Island, the contrast is so stark, and that is a great case of seeing is believing. So there is the reality of the situation, and sometimes we do have to just try and bring that to people. And now we've got the Hauraki Marine Protection Bill.
I was just thinking about that in Edinburgh, how only recently has he kind of shown us the other side of celebrity, celebrity photography, that was the actual beautiful state.
And how do you? In what way do you mean? You mean David Attenborough is now doing natural history and showing the reality of climate, the climate crisis?
He did.
Is that this thing of that thing, but we've been watching since we were kids.
It's all fine. Yeah.
Attenborough images.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like going to the zoo, thinking this is all lovely and beautiful.
Yeah, I think David Attenborough in the last few years has had massive epiphany because he's witnessed it with his own eyes, and he's seen the degradation and the demise over time of a whole species going extinct. And so he's realised, shit, I need to show this to the world, because he's got a very privileged platform. He's got a massive platform. And of course, BBC Natural History Unit in Bristol, they're all quite committed now to doing that. Of course, the irony is flying, a huge carbon footprint to get over to those countries in Africa in particular to film that stuff. And now there's a lot of talk about sustainability in filmmaking, which I'm very invested in and trying to do what I can, and working with in-country talent. So actually working with filmmakers in those countries so that you don't have to. Yeah, Albert, the certification.
I just wanted to make one comment to round off what we're saying, because to be honest, it's like that's why I started photographing the media, because the media have been covering the climate crisis and some of the other crises over time, but there's a kind of, and I started this kind of project 20 years ago or more because it wasn't getting through, and it's still not getting through, or it's actually, luckily it is starting to get through. But there was a quote that I came across 25 years ago, and it really made me aware of why I started photographing the media, because it was, I think I'll try and get this right, because it's a very good one, and it speaks to what we're talking about in our reality today. Our incapacity to act, observing the crisis that we're in, and thank you for eloquently describing it. And it was by Susan Buck Morse, and it's somewhere in a book, and it's something like, today humanity is capable of experiencing its own destruction as an aesthetic experience of the highest order. And unfortunately, that's what we're in, even as an artist or as a professional journalist, etc. Unfortunately, because we've become so into the viewing, we're fighting to respond in the real world, which again, that whole difference between
that's
the virtual and
last
real.
chance tourism. Let's all go and watch the demise of our planet.
Yeah. No, and I was just going to say, so with my photos in particular, I'm actually not showing the climate crisis directly. That's the kind of the point of it, is I want to show the hedonism of like the human race and what we do on vacation and how we try and enjoy the world, which I'm not trying to cast judgment on. But I think it's kind of like goes to the theme of believe, like you're looking at these photos, but what are you really looking at? Like there's people dancing on cruise ships and like swimming in pools, but like they're going past coral reefs that are bleached. And like, like local communities that are just not benefiting from like the global north's, I guess like colonialism, capitalism take on when they go to these places, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to play with that theme as well, to try to get people to look at it, because, if you, especially with because I'm from Canada, the wildfires in Canada last year, it was like every front page photo was the wildfires, and after a while you just get so overwhelmed you can't even look at it. So at some point you kind of have to start telling stories a bit differently too, to get people to try and, I don't know, take action or believe what's happening.
Can I just round that off? I think your work, Sarah, is a perfect metaphor for seeing the climate crisis and how a lot of people are reacting, which is just business as usual. And let's all just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, and just let's dance and be merry as the ship goes down.
Right. Which might be an option.
Yeah, let's try and stem the tide. But anyway, maybe Q&A.
Thank you very much. That was really great. So I would like to now open it up to anybody who's got any questions. I'll stand up and hand the mic over. So Victor, you've obviously had a few at the moment. Anybody want to ask our panellists anything or make any statements or comments about what you've just heard?
Are you worried about AI?
Cheryl, would you like to?
I just wanted to ask John. John, last night you were talking about how you're making a stand against AI. I thought you could perhaps explain it here, how making AI images is actually a protest.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. That's a lovely question. I didn't pay you for that, did I? Yeah. So, as I said earlier, I mean, and what was said by, about the media holding the line on not using AI, and or at least having some transparency about what they're showing. So, this is my last ditch. This is the pinnacle of my career so far, by the way. I say so far, one hopes to have more. But to have these images in this festival, for the very reasons I was talking about. Originally, I thought I wanted to do a street poster campaign of these. Couldn't get hold of the street poster people to do it. But I wanted to make it a public statement of about the times we're in. So there's a book of all the remnants of these pictures. They're all stills from little movies animated by AI. So that's the bit the AI did. It reanimated a still image. And why I was shocked when I first saw this happening was because it was being used to reanimate dead images.
Oh.
So dead people, ancestors. It was, in fact, it was offered as freebie on an ancestor site. Come and reanimate your dead ancestors. And I was so shocked in that, and going back to that very visceral thing about capturing the soul of the person when you take a photograph, especially with the light traveling through space and hitting silver, which I think is, is that kind of real moment in the universe of time and space, different in a digital environment. But so I wanted to capture a moment in time. So these are, for want of a bit of an obvious statement, but these are eternal moments. So every one of these figures has gone inside to think about their legacy and the world, or they're dead, or they're meditating. But they had to be living people, because we're in the living world. The old people, the dead people, the famous people, like I've got this most beautiful image, which is why I did the book, because I couldn't leave it on the cutting room floor, literally. But this one of Mona Lisa, for me, really captures that. It doesn't have to be ugly old, President, what's his name? It can be other people, and obviously she's not alive anymore. But to be honest, it's a pacification effort. So when people glimpse these online, especially, but if I hand them a postcard, but when they pop up online, they really, for me, they may not really, but my effort is to make them little memes of meditation and compassion. Obviously easier for some than others, but I think when you look online and see this picture, and it's popping up now, and I hope it will pop up again. I'm hoping it to go iconic, actually, because there's a million pictures of poor old Mona Lisa, really horrible ones as well. The rapping Mona Lisa, the crying Mona Lisa, the dead Mona Lisa. And there's a couple with her eyes closed, but for me, this is the moment of compassion and the eternal moment, which all the photographs are about. And I'm not saying you have to like the people in the pictures. In fact, it's a bit of a Rorschach test of whether you like Greta and you like the Dalai Lama, but you don't like Putin and you don't like Blair. Very good arguments around that. But at the end of the day, our mortality is what these are trying to capture. And in a way, I'm trying to capture the mortality of photography itself, because these are the last old-fashioned photographs where AI is transparently being used. And I'm explaining that. But I think next year in festivals, with all the rules in place, I think we'll be in a very uncertain position as to what is that? Who made it? Was it an event witnessed in time and then printed out?
But it begs the question for me is like, who gives an artist the right
Totally.
to manipulate that image? That's Leonardo's work.
Now. So the people,
And-
the
yeah,
living people,
and the
they
person.
own the copyright. If they want to come
Yeah.
and see me and say, "Hang on, you're using my image,"
Yeah.
if and say, "Where's the copyright?" I'll give them the money.
So,
Fine.
informed consent, or, using my image to actually promote something that you completely disagree with. So that's another issue, right? Because suddenly people's images are going to be used to promote propaganda for Putin or propaganda for Trump or, who knows what.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? Just dive in there, just anything. Could be you or a photographer. Chris? Oh, here we go.
It's a question for you, basically, Jeanette. Is that why my son's generation and the generation after him don't trust the media anymore, that they're looking for alternative media? Because he gets his media, in fact he started with Al Jazeera because he didn't trust the BBC anymore, which is the era I grew up with Panorama, with factual, Pilger, trusted sources. He doesn't trust the media, so he seeks alternative media, but that media is manipulated.
That's the problem.
Well, that's the problem. The mainstream media, as we've been called, they just don't believe it anymore, which is very frustrating for people.
It's quite dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
And it's been attacked by people to discredit the BBC,
Sure. And
the creditable.
and everyone else. It's what we were discussing at the beginning. People just believing that they are manipulating things.
But sometimes the
on a daily
BBC
basis.
needs to be discredited, like the Jimmy Savile.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, sorry. I
Yeah.
can't hear.
You have to call out.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that there are issues with the BBC. I mean, there are some examples where you know, the gatekeepers haven't done their job properly. But on the whole, I would trust the BBC any day over the platform.
I think, yeah, if you look at it the percentage-wise.
And
yeah.
And I think the very real danger is that the disinfo merchants who have their own narrative and their own agenda have gone out of their way.
Also,
Yeah.
I am a journalist, have been a journalist, love photographers, love spending time with them, because essentially we share common values. But we are also constructing, framing, subjective.
Yeah.
We've all got our agenda, and you've all revealed it. So the biggest challenge is how to actually, in the face of social media, fake media, charges, and maybe Jeanette can talk to this, how do we win that war, that which seems almost a futile battle at times?
I think bursting little bubbles and winning the little battles every day, I guess. You know, just keep putting up the, no, that's not real, this is real, this is real. I think that's how you have to do it.
There's also a famous, the last saying is the famous saying, which is that the main objective of journalism is to, somebody saying something is to look out the window and say, someone says it's raining, to look out the window and say, yes, it's raining, or no, it's not raining.
No.
And that brings us nicely to the climate change conversation. No, just kidding. I just wanted to mention, in relation to your son's viewing of Al Jazeera is actually based on the BBC World Service model.
Sure.
And it has been probably set up by a lot of ex-BBC staffers.
And it's at #1 London. So
Yeah, and also there's some great New Zealand journalists who were on TV3 and at TVNZ who are part of their team. So, I mean, Al Jazeera is a fantastic broadcaster. Obviously, it's an alternative narrative to Western media. And on that basis, you know, we had a curator in 2017, Shahid Ul-Alam, from Bangladesh. He started a press agency up in Asia called DRIC, which was around the majority world idea, which is the majority of the world is not the West. And so we have been very fortunate and very privileged during our lifetimes to have the narratives that we've got in our minds and in our history, but there is a bigger part of the world that has a completely different one. And so, you know, social media and travel and the way that we are living our world, in our world now, there is a lot of challenges and there's a lot of tension. And really, I guess that comes back down to how we all see things. And photography, obviously, is a key part of that.
I think we're of an era, though, that we check facts. We don't just take it as fact. We check alternative sources. Whereas what I'm saying to the younger generation now, they're on small bites. They're on TikTok.
Instagram.
Wherever they get there. But my son's gone the other way. He doesn't trust Al Jazeera. They've gone for the dark way.
Right, very dangerous. Because there's no checks and balances there. There's a series of standing up a claim, for example, getting to the bottom of something and standing it up and saying, well, what is the veracity of that? And it can be a long chain to get to the original source of something, corroborating sources. Yeah, and the dark web, I mean, you know, you can say whatever you like and say, oh, I saw that, somebody on Facebook said it's true, or I did my own research. And it's like, but your research are fake sources. And you look at these alternative blogs, and I saw this very much in Libya, and particularly in Syria, because of the driving the narrative. And there are some Western journalists who call themselves journalists, but they're bloggers, who have an agenda and a narrative, and they get paid by the Assad's regime or Putin's regime to go and write untruths. And then there's a huge following of people who follow that media. There's Mint Media, for example, who's one of them. And it's really dangerous, and it can get people killed. I mean, it has, you know. Sorry? Lee Anderson, the MP in the UK. Yes, well, I think he's, well, I mean, they'll take propaganda for their own narrative, as Chantal Baker here. I think, did she go to Ukraine or something? She claimed to know the truth. She's not a journalist in any sense of the word. You know.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and taking part in our panel discussion today. Thank you very much to Jeanette, John, Sharon and Sarah, and to our boutique audience here today. Thanks so much. Do enjoy the rest of the festival. There's lots of photography shows on around town. Sharon's film and Daylight Media photography shorts are on the screen at Aotea Square. Sarah's work's on down at the Silo, in the Silo Park area, as is John's, as is the New Zealand Herald Believe exhibition, which I think you all know anyway. So yeah, have a great festival. Thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much. John. Very interesting.